Night has long since fallen over the small town. Its inhabitants slept a sweet sleep. Nothing bothered them. Not the noise of the trains that passed frequently on the railways. Not the barking of street dogs. Not even the huge full moon that was especially bright that night. No one could hear a thump at the end of town in a cemetery, and if anyone saw it, they might go crazy. On one of the recent graves, two men were digging up a grave. No one was there except them and an old woman who was sitting on a bench near the grave. One of the workers asked the old woman if she changed her mind or so, as why she would dig up that grave or what she is waiting to see in it. But the woman told him that to continue his work, as she paid them a good amount of money to do this work. She told him that it's her dead son's grave and she wants to look at him one last time, then they will bury it again. The two men looked at each other. They thought that the old woman had gone mad, but they have nothing to do with this as long as she paid them the money. So they continued their work, asking no more questions. The old lady kept silent, remembering her beloved dead son, who came to life after so many years of trying to be pregnant. She tried for so many years until her husband left her for a younger and healthier woman, and his new wife was pregnant after only 2 months. Elizabeth, who lived alone, a young agronomist, came to her village suddenly to do some research. Elizabeth worked as a translator and guide for him during his stay, but he liked her and he seduced her one night. And the next morning, she couldn't believe how she lost her mind and slept with a man younger than her like that. He was only 24 years and Elizabeth was 40. This man told her that he didn't need to be in a relationship after that night, and Elizabeth suffered for a week for her stupidity. She strangled in her heart the love that was just budding, and yet she was completely indifferent to this man and acted as if there was nothing between them, and she didn't say much. It was like she was nice. Past is the past. You cannot change the past. Then Elizabeth found out that she was pregnant and she almost lost her mind. She was happy, pregnant and afraid. What a fool. She was pregnant with a young man. She lived with her husband for 15 years. All the doctors told her that she was infertile. However, the doctors advised her not to keep this baby due to her age, but she refused their advice. Soon the man left the city. Elizabeth was also happy. She only needed her son. Months passed and Elizabeth gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. When she first had her child at her breast, understood that she was the happiest woman in the world. She's not alone on earth, you know? He was a wonderful boy. He learns well at school, participates in several Olympics, and is increasingly interested in athletics. Elizabeth thought her son would go to university after he graduated. Doing mathematics, foreign languages, or even sports everywhere has been successful and triumphant, and Elizabeth agreed with every decision he made, until one day he came to his mother with a surprising decision. He decided to join the army after ending high school. Elizabeth was afraid of that decision and tried to argue her son, but she couldn't help it. She knew she wouldn't win any arguments because her son was stubborn. Elizabeth decided to hold a party for her son joining the army. All the colleagues came to celebrate. Helena was there too, his first love. She was a nice girl and Elizabeth liked her. She even imagined her as her daughter-in-law. Long after the train left the station, they lay in each other's arms, crying and looking for the train that had long since dissolved into the horizon. Helena is a really nice girl. After moving to the city to study, she never forgot about Elizabeth. She always called her. Once Helena called her and her voice sounded agitated. She told her to turn the TV on as there is a war. Elizabeth's eyes darkened. She started to feel dizzy. Helena told her that it's not really a war, but they're shooting. The woman felt sick, hung up the phone, and literally fell into the seat in the hall. When she had recovered a bit, she turned on the television. The news she heard seemed to calm her down a bit. Yes, shot, but those who serve only 1 year do not participate, and that's good. At 1 a.m., her son, Kevin, called her. Sometimes they let them call. When she heard his voice, the balance in the woman's soul returned. He felt that his mother was afraid because of what she heard in the news. So he told her, "Don't believe everything, mother." The next camps were a little nervous, but ours had already calmed them down. Only those who have a contract go there, and we're just going to train. Son, be careful, please. Of course, mother. They talked a little more, then Elizabeth felt uncomfortable again after they hung up on the phone. A week passed and Elizabeth heard nothing from Kevin. She was already worried. Days passed and it became 2 months, and she heard nothing from Kevin. She headed towards the local army camp in their village and asked about Kevin. They reassured her not to worry, as if something happened. They would have been warned a long time ago. After 8 months of waiting, Elizabeth heard a knock on her door. Children of the village came to her saying that her son is back, as they saw someone look like him in an army's uniform. Elizabeth was in great happiness. She left her door open and ran to welcome her son, but she dealt devastatingly when she noticed that the coming man isn't her Kevin. This soldier came to her with a paper that said that her son died of a heart attack and they buried him in the neighboring village. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She fell on the ground, her legs were shocked, and she couldn't stand anymore. She even couldn't see him or say goodbye to him. When the news reached to Helena, she returned from the city and stayed with Elizabeth and never left her. But Helena was not convinced of the reason of death, they informed Miss Elizabeth. And when she talked with Elizabeth, she found that she is also not convinced of the reason of death. Helena said, "You have to find out why he died, and that has to be done as soon as possible to expose and explain." Soon Elizabeth and Helena went to the village where they knew he was buried. They wanted to see him one last time. But in the tomb, they told him that there is no exhumation. She was told that her son had died of an infection, and it is now dangerous and even punishable by law to exhume his body. But at the office, I was told that he died of a heart attack. Elizabeth objected. "I don't know what they told you there," the man in the tomb replied. "They knew that something was wrong." "At least show me my son's grave," the woman begged through tears. "He is in the village cemetery. You will be escorted shortly." Helena and Elizabeth arrived at the cemetery. It was the darkest corner where indigents and those who could not be buried by their families were buried. Helena and Elizabeth silently stared at the metal plate on the wooden cross. Kevin lived only 19 years. Suddenly, Helena felt a kind of discomfort. She asked Elizabeth to hand over Kevin's death papers again, and she compared everything again. "I don't understand anything here. It says that Kevin was born in the 25th, and here on the plaque it says 26th, and in the papers the same." "We're confused again," Elizabeth replied wearily and laid down on the tomb and began to cry. "My dear son, they didn't even let me say goodbye to you." Helena convinced her that she should act. "You must demand exhumation anyway." After the cemetery, they returned to the head of the arm department. And when Elizabeth demanded an exhumation, they refused, and they took her outside and were told to calm down and accept the situation. At the hotel, Helena and Elizabeth packed in silence. They would soon catch their train, and then Elizabeth dropped her suitcase and started to cry. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I myself will dig that grave with my own hands. And when I'm sure it's my son, I'm going home." "Helena, you can't be a part of this. I understand you. You have your whole life ahead of you," Elizabeth said while crying. "I won't leave without you," Helena sighed. "Tell me, what did you come up with?" Elizabeth told her that she would hire 2 men to dig the grave up, and she would give them all the money she collected all those years to do so, as she knows that it's a dangerous thing to do. Surprisingly, they found 2 workers to do the job quickly at the station. They saw 2 strong men and explained what had to be done, and they agreed. They're not ashamed that they are clearly going to break the law because they've been promised a lot of money. They thought that if they were caught, they would run away. And behold, under the darkness of the night, they arrived at the cemetery. Helena was taking care of the guards. They were so happy that a young woman came to visit that all they see is a cross upon cross. Elizabeth stood by the grave waiting tensely for the 2 shovels digging. One of them screamed, banging on the lid of the coffin. The 2 hurriedly lifted the coffin out of the tomb. The workers noticed that the coffin is not heavy at all. "Open it," Elizabeth said. The men grabbed the lid and the coffin opened with a bang. The 3 looked inside and remained portrayed. The moon was very bright and everything was clear. The coffin was empty. "Where is the dead?" one of them asked. "He ran away." The other laughed and looked at Elizabeth, who was stunned. "It cannot be," Elizabeth screamed as if she had woken up from a deep sleep. "Leave everything as it is. Go away. I will continue alone. Thank you." Having given them the money for this service, the woman began to call Helena first, and then the police. When they arrived at the cemetery, she explained what she was doing here. Of course, the police couldn't believe that 2 fragile women dug a grave by themselves and removed a coffin without anyone's help. But they closed their eyes. Everyone was interested in another question. Where is the body? In the morning at the city attorney's office, representatives of the military public ministry came. From the beginning, they wanted to blame the mother for what happened to the grave. But the most important question remained unanswered. Where is the body? The head of the department where he worked, namely, was also interrogated, and that's when the truth came out. Turns out he knew he was in training camp with other young men in the army. Then the real shooting began. The boys ran like rabbits. They got scared. It was the first time they were in a real war, and they were caught as prisoners, and instead of trying to rescue them from the enemy's hands, they preferred to announce them dead. Easy thing for them. Who would have thought that a mother would be so stubborn? Half a year has passed. Helena and Elizabeth returned home. There were many changes in that military unit, including the head of the unit, as the old one went to military court for his actions. But there was one problem. How could they save Kevin and his colleagues? They even didn't know if they were dead or alive. Elizabeth was devastated as the time passed, but she waited until the end that she knew her son is alive. But one morning, someone knocked on Elizabeth's window. The unfortunate woman opened it and froze. Is she dreaming? Even she rubbed her eyes. At the door was Kevin alive. Weak, but alive. "Mom, I'm back," he said. "I'm dreaming, honey," she whispered. "No, Mom, you're not dreaming. I'm alive." He ran towards the woman. Seeing that, she fainted. When Elizabeth woke up, she was in bed, covered with a blanket, and next to her, her son was lying alive. "Honey, how is it possible? They told me you were dead." "They were wrong," sighing. "You know, when the shooting started, I fell unconscious. I was held prisoner all this time. I was with other prisoners in the basement. The government agreed to the exchange, but at the last moment, everything failed. A little while ago, the transfer ran. All prisoners were sent to the hospital, and from there, I managed to get back home. I put candles in the church so you could rest in peace. I'm so sorry, Mom. Dear Mother, from now on I won't let you go anywhere. After some time later, Kevin was admitted to the Technical University. Now he studies and succeeds, as soon he will marry Helena.